Hello, and welcome to another edition of A Reader's Paradise. Say, if you like the interviews that I'm doing and you like the literature that's being performed for you, please consider leaving us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, please write a review on iTunes Podcast. Your ratings and reviews help others to find the show. Also, with this episode, please stick around until the end of the show to get a preview of the audio drama Lenny Gray. You will not want to miss this wonderful audio drama that follows a family for a number of years through history. The story starts in 1918 and marches forward in time and intermingles African American history and world history all in one wonderful narration. With that being said, folks, we have a wonderful author with us tonight, and let me read her bio so you can get a sense of who we have tonight, someone very, very special. Her bio says, after receiving her PhD, she was unemployed and therefore asked herself what she could do to make herself more marketable. Trevy immediately built the groundwork for a publishing company, which she started in 1999. She is currently the owner of Rayomi Publishing, LLC, a successful independent book publishing and consulting company based in Durham, North Carolina. Trevy is the author of Round Bout Midnight and Time Will Tell, and is the co-editor of two scholarly anthologies, Nature of a Sister, a Black woman's lived experiences and contemporary culture, and Building Diverse Communities, Applications of Communications Research, and an inspirational anthology entitled How We Got Over, Testimonies of Faith, Hope, and Courage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Trevy McDonald. Dr. McDonald, tell us a little bit more about you after that wonderful bio about your background.
I'm a native Chicagoan, and I actually started writing as a child. And my dad had a sister named Valerie. I was her only niece. And she sent me a dress. It wasn't a special occasion. I sent her a thank you note and she wrote me back. I actually learned my love of writing initially through letters that I sent to my Aunt Valerie all the way through college. Then when I was a little bit older, my friends and I used to get together in the summers and write plays. In the plays, we were always 19 years old because we thought you're out of high school, then you can drive and you can have a boyfriend. And we would perform the plays in someone's yard for 25 cents admission. Of course, nobody came but our parents and our siblings, but we had fun and we had a really, really great childhood growing up on the south side of Chicago. When I was, I think, in sixth grade, I had to write a book for homework. And I created this book titled Drama. And it was about acting and how you could become famous from acting and make lots of money. And my teacher entered it in the Illinois Young Authors. And my book was selected along with, I think, 3 other students from my class. We were selected to go to Illinois Young Authors. And Gwendolyn Brooks was the keynote speaker, and she autographed my book.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's cool. I didn't know that's how you started writing. That's kind of awesome. So do you still have your plays laying around that you may want to dust off one day and actually try to produce?
I don't have the plays, but I do have the book that Gwendolyn Brooks autographed. In fact, when I released Time Will Tell in 1999, my mom actually pulled it out because she had saved a lot of work from my childhood, from elementary and high school.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's wonderful. Now, Trevy, you and I, we go back to the beginnings of publishing because we both came through this publishing world around the same time. We both published our first books in 1999. And, you know, things have most certainly changed since that time in the publishing world. And your first book, Time Will Tell. Tell us about that. Give us a sense of what that book was about.
So Time Will Tell is a coming-of-age story about the power of friendship in the lives of 3 women, Thomasine, Rachel, and Hope, who are going to their 10-year high school reunion. They're 3 girls who met in Sunday school when they were 11, went to high school together, and the book follows their journeys through. It starts chronologically at the senior prom and follows them off to different colleges, and they keep in touch through letters. Remember, those things we used to put stamps on and put in the mail before we had all this technology to send emails and instant messages and text messages. And just life after college, the relationships they're in, the heartbreak, the marriages, starting families up to the 10-year reunion.
Okay. So right there, you said there was a lot going on. You said they started families, there was heartbreak and those sorts of things right up to the 10-year reunion. So let me ask you, do you believe that it is, does this give, does your book give young people a sense of, what could go right and what could go wrong as they enter into the fullness of adulthood, especially after college? Because that's the age when people, especially after college, when they feel like they have arrived, they're fully adults. They're in their early 20s. There may not be any curfews and they get to go out and do whatever they want to. But it can also be a time where you can make some critical missteps. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. And that's what happens with my characters. The artists who designed my book cover use primary colors to describe the characters' moods and personalities. Mm-hmm. So you have Thomasine. Thomasine's a preacher's daughter, and she's red hot. She's into everything and everybody but herself. So she's making some of those decisions that are costly at times, and she actually has some experiences that happen to her that do define her life, as we all do. And she has a spiritual awakening towards the middle of the book and turns her life around. She does a complete, turnaround. And then you have Rachel, who has a sunny personality. She's sort of the glue that holds the three together. But I wanted to show an example with Rachel of someone who has a really, really, really wonderful man. She meets Patrick when she's in college. They hit it off very well. And everybody who reads the book tells me, I just love Patrick so much. Please tell me everything's going to work out between him and Rachel. And I tell them, you're really going to hate me. Because it doesn't. Rachel's aunt, who raised her, unfortunately is diagnosed with cancer and passes away. And Patrick's away in another city, and somebody else is there for her. And that's who she ends up with. And that person, she later finds out, has a chemical dependency. And this is 2 kids later, and a move to another city where she doesn't really know anyone. So she's got to deal with that. And then there's hope. I describe hope as masquerading self-righteousness for saintliness until the world she spent 10 years building comes crashing down around her all at once. So Hope is an only child, and she's really been indulged all of her life, and she's very, very entitled. And then there's this really rich family tradition. There's this fictional Black women's college in Savannah, Georgia, that she attends. And she had to attend that school because her mother attended that school, and every woman in her family attended Harrington. In fact, they all lived in the same residence hall. And she is... her grandmother's 3 granddaughters are named Faith, Hope, and Charity. And she marries her high school sweetheart. She decides at the senior prom that she and Jason are going to get married. And her friends are like, you're so young. Why are you going to tie yourself down this young? Anything can happen. And she's insistent. And if anyone tries to tell her anything differently, it's, oh, you're jealous of me. And she really competes against her friends. And finds out that that's not the true essence of friendship.
Let me ask you this question as it relates to, reality and fiction, because, a lot of fiction really mirrors reality and situations or social situations or expectations that, we all may have when we're young. And sometimes, the expectations of men and women may not necessarily be in alignment with each other at, certain stages of life. So let me ask you this. Do you sense that, even today, even back then or even today, do you still sense that there is this urgency or maybe this deep desire for girls to, or men and women, that as soon as they finish higher education, that there has to be this sort of conveyor belt that pushes them towards starting a family, getting a house, and, trying to live the American dream. Do you think, that we should still be encouraging that at such a young age? Or do you think it's better for people to try to take some time to get to know themselves better and perhaps, develop a little bit more before they jump into these sorts of relationships or starting a family or taking that huge step into marriage to perhaps lower the risk factors of things falling apart?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Personally, I think people should take more time to get to know themselves. I think also one of the big obstacles that a lot of college graduates are facing is a ridiculously high amount of student loan debt that kind of delays them being able to buy that first house and do some of those things. But when I think back to the people I graduated from college with, many of them married shortly after college, and it did not last, unfortunately. Some of the marriages did last. Some of them, I'd say a greater percentage of them did not. So I do think that people should be encouraged really to get to know themselves first and to explore and enjoy life a bit before they marry.
Yeah, because I know that as we mature, the person, like, for example, the person I was in 1999 is nowhere near the man that I am today. And
right.
Yeah. And so for me, even my writing has matured over that particular, time period, because when I was writing, when I was younger, I was doing it from the, a much younger perspective and a much different view of the world and society. And I will be the first to admit that I was writing from the perspective of this is the way it should be and this is the way it needs to go, as opposed to really understanding, the complexities of people. Like one of the things you mentioned, you said you have a character that later discovers that there's a substance abuse or an addiction problem. And, not all addictions, are drug related. There are many forms of addictions and many forms of coping skills that, as a younger person, we may not necessarily see or understand. And then And then sometimes I think when we have expectations in relationships, because I'm quite sure in your story, there were points where one of the downfalls of some of the relationships in your fictional characters where expectations weren't being met. And I think we all have implicit expectations and explicit expectations. And, explicit expectations may be, okay, we're married now, we're exclusive to each other. But the implicit ones, the ones that aren't really talked about, but you figure you know me and you should know that, those are the ones that, that cause the problems. Yeah?
Yeah. Yes. And then along those same lines, when I think about the types of guys I would date in 1989, I either would have, if I had married one of them, I either would have been divorced a long time ago or I would not have grown to the person that I am now.
Yeah. Let me ask you this writer's question. Where do you draw your inspiration for your writing? And also, I like to say that as writers, one of our jobs is to wrestle with some sort of situation or some sort of complication in society or culture that we're trying to provide an answer to. And so let me, ask you this question, like, what inspires you? And then what is an argument that you try to solve through your writing?
Wow, this is a really great question. So when I wrote Time Will Tell, I remember like when I made the decision to write a novel, I told my family I was in fact in Chicago for Christmas, getting ready to start my teaching career. And I hear from my mom and my brother, oh, that's a really big thing. Do you think you can do it? My father actually had some books titled and one of them was titled The Weekend Novelist by Robert Ray. It's designed to help you write a novel in a year just by working on weekends.
Okay.
So I kind of knew where my story would start and where it would end, but I didn't know what would unfold in the midst. And I did some of those exercises, and one of them is what ifs. What if this happened to this character and it led to this and it led to that? And that's how I sort of got the backstory and some of the situations that they would deal with.
Mm-hmm.
I've already mentioned, substance abuse is one of the issues that's explored in Time Will Tell, but there are several social issues that are explored in Time Will Tell. And what I found, one of them is acquaintance rape. And in Time Will Tell, Time Will Tell, Thomasine actually does her master's thesis, where she interviews women who have experienced acquaintance rape. She's getting a master's degree in performance studies, and she constructs a performance around their narratives, intertwined with Maya Angelou's poem, And Still I Rise. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very powerful piece because when students in performance studies write master's theses, they actually have to do a performance as part of their thesis. So her friends actually come to town, and they are some of the women who are the performers. And like I said, it's very, very, very powerful. Well, after I published Time Will Tell, several women I had never met before I wrote that book told me that I wrote their life story.
Wow.
In those characters, in that particular situation.
That's powerful right there, what you said, just the subject of acquaintance rape, of, what people may have to, unfortunately come face to face with, both men and women, in, situations where they may, have a violation against their person occur. And, sometimes people suffer through that in silence. And people get
absolutely,
people get afraid or ashamed to come forward if something like that happens, and they internalize that wound, and that wound sometimes can act out in other ways, or cause other personality disturbances, so that people may blame themselves for something that isn't their fault. That you have to wrestle with the dark side of that and try to find your way through to the light of something. And it also, I think, speaks to, both men and women who may be predatory, when they, when they do those sorts of things. And sometimes, when we go into a dating situation or something like that, I don't think our mindsets are necessarily, focused on, I may have an acquaintance rape situation here, or, am I dating someone who may be a bit predatory? And so, those are things that I think when you read something and you do a deeper dive into, reading fiction or literature, and you pull out these, conversational nuggets, because I like to say, people, when they read a book, they get out of what they're supposed to get out of it. So when you had somebody who told you that they wrote, you wrote their life story, that means that there was something in there that they got out of it that they were supposed to get and understand and see and, perhaps deal with, because that's what literature does. Literature sometimes helps us to deal with really complex issues, because if we look at it through the eyes of a character or through a character's experience, we're able to better separate ourselves from it and look at the situation, with a bit more clarity. And I think that's one of the wonderful powers, of literature. And kudos to you for having someone to say, wow, they felt like you wrote their life story, or at least a difficult time in their life that they, have to wrestle with, that they had to wrestle with. Yeah. Let me go ahead.
And when I was writing it, I was in an organization called the National Communication Association, and met a woman who was working on her dissertation on the subject. So she actually read the excerpt once I wrote it, and she said that I really covered every facet in that performance.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just a sign of really good writing. I mean, when you really understand an issue and you try to offer, advice or healing or, you know, a perspective, you know, on something. And that's what I think makes a really, really memorable story and lovable and likable characters, because I like characters. I don't know about you, but as a writer, I like characters who are complex. They are not, they are not cookie cutter people that, you know, got all of their stuff together and everything's going fine. You know, I like people who are complex. You know, they may have some areas of their life together, but other areas are just a mess. And sometimes they're too close to see it. And sometimes people, you know, human nature, sometimes people don't know how to get out of their own way, you know, and so
That's very true.
So I like to write characters like that, you know, who can't see the forest for the trees. They may be brilliant, but they have a certain level of suffering that they're going through with whatever issue that they're dealing with. So let me ask you this other question as a writer. I like to say, right, you know, writing for me, I have to get in the mood. I have to be in a certain space when I write. And sometimes I have to put on like binary music sort of to, you know, free my mind to get myself going. So let me ask you, what's your writing process? Do you have to, you know, write first thing in the morning? Do you have to go write at a cafe? You know, do you have to do, you know, an Indian rain dance before you can get the creativity to flow? What's your writing process like?
It's really interesting because I've had a different ritual with each book. So with Time Will Tell, whenever I got stuck, I would put Anita Baker's Rapture CD or Ramsey Lewis's Between the Keys CD in, and it brought me out of writer's block.
Mm.
And with Time Will Tell, I actually started writing that in a spiral notebook when I was supposed to be proctoring an exam on my very first teaching job. And I got the first chapter written. And then with the second chapter, I was waiting for a student to come and take a makeup exam. I had a class, like an 8:05 a.m. class, a 9:10 a.m. class. Then my next class was not until 6 in the evening. And I stayed on campus all day so that the student could take this exam in the middle of the day, and she didn't show up. So I was really mad, and I wrote the second chapter. With the second novel, which I have not published yet, is titled Madness Galore. My ritual was to actually brew a pot of Hawaiian hazelnut coffee at 11 o'clock at night, and I would write from 11 at night until 5 in the morning. And at that time, I was living in Chicago with family, so I had to write when the house was quiet and when the dogs were asleep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With Round Bout Midnight, I think I write better at night because I would start at like 7 in the evening, and I would write until about 5 or 6 in the morning.
Oh wow, that's a long time. That's another full-time job, you know, to do that. Yeah. Yeah,
because I'm a college professor, so I'm off during the summers.
Yeah. Yeah, so that works out. That works out great for you. I mean, I most certainly have done that on weekends where I've just had writing binges where I just sat in and I wrote. I didn't shave. I didn't eat. You know, my dog looked at me funny. You know, because I'm just walking around in robe and flip flops. You know, constantly drinking stuff. You know, walking around talking out a scene as I'm going. Oh yeah, and you know, because I'm talking to myself and I'm getting the dialogue and I've become the people in the book. Do you become the people in the book when you write it? I mean, do you really chant?
Absolutely. Yes. When I was near the end of Time Will Tell, I remember becoming very sad because I was able to relive my college days through Thomasine, Rachel, and Hope.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh my goodness, they're my age now. How boring. My age at the time was 27.
Uh-huh.
So I absolutely do. I feel the emotions that they feel. And one of the things I always recommend for people who tell me they want to write fiction or literature is that you have to get to know your characters intimately.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
What I learned with the second book is that whenever I had writer's block, it was because I was trying to take the characters someplace they were not supposed to go.
Oh.
And they were not going to allow that.
Oh, that's a good one. You were trying to take the character someplace they weren't supposed to go. And that's how you got your writing. That's a good, you know what? I believe I've experienced that one too, where I sit down and I say, okay, you know, let this character come to me. And, you know, I know where I want to go, but then I get in the way. my ego gets in the way. And instead of just letting it,
Right.
letting it come as it's supposed to come and, really hear them. Really, really hear them. And that's really a deeper skill set when you sit down and write, to really be able to hear your writer's voice, to be able to hear that other voice clearly as it comes through. I know sometimes, I have sat down and that voice, it just takes over. It just takes over. And I go into like this writer's trance, and I just,
Yeah.
and I am physically here, but I am not psychologically here. I have moved aside, and there's something else that has moved in and starts telling the story. And, some people in sports, people may call that flow or whatever, but I call it a writer's flow, where I can't stop. I can't be interrupted.
Yes.
I have to give birth to this. And sometimes afterwards, I'm like, physically and emotionally exhausted.
Yes. Yes. I have experienced that as well. And a big piece of Round Bout Midnight is about healing. So yeah,
let's talk about
Round Bout.
Yeah, let's talk about Round Bout Midnight. So give us the background on that.
Okay, so when I wrote Time Will Tell, I was in my 20s, and I was young and foolish enough to think it was a great idea to end the book with a cliffhanger.
Okay.
So the cliffhanger in Time Will Tell is after the 10-year reunion. One of the characters' husbands asks for a divorce. Another one has a question about the paternity of her oldest child, because she was in two relationships that were kind of close together. And then the other character reconnects with her high school crush. They hit it off well. She's going abroad for a couple of years to do research, and he's supposed to come to the airport to see her off, and he doesn't show up. What she doesn't know, that the readers know, is that he got pulled over for speeding. And the ticket was being written right when her plane from O'Hare to LAX flew over his head. And because he is a man of means, he actually booked the ticket on her flight. So Time Will Tell ends with him sitting in first class. She's sitting in business class. She's got headphones on. And the pilot makes an announcement that lets everybody know he's on that plane. And it involves their pet names for each other. But she doesn't know. So with Time Will Tell is actually the title of a song on an early Wynton Marsalis recording, The All-American Hero.
Okay.
As is Round Bout Midnight, because I'm a big Wynton Marsalis fan.
Mm-hmm.
All of the chapters in Time Will Tell are titled after songs, and they relate to a theme in the chapter and were current when the chapter was set.
Mm-hmm.
So with Round Bout Midnight, all of the chapters are titled after jazz songs, and about 90% of them are jazz standards. So the first chapter of Round Bout Midnight is It Never Entered My Mind, and that is the opening line for each of the characters.
Yes.
Because it picks up exactly where Time Will Tell ended.
Right, because when I was reading that, I was like, oh wow, this is. I immediately fell into the story. I immediately fell into the scene, and I was immediately there with the characters. Speaking of Around About Midnight, is there something you want to read from that particular book? You have an excerpt for us?
Yeah, I can read the first chapter if since you've read it. Is it appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Please do. Please do. So let me count you down backwards from 5, and then I'll go. And then, when you're done, just say, I'm done. So now I'm getting excited now. Now I'm going to be read to. Okay. This is okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It never entered my mind that the world I spent 10 years building would come crashing down around me all at once. Hope thought at a time when she should have been basking in the afterglow. She looked over at the red glowing numbers, which illuminated the silhouette of the condom wrapper on the nightstand. The only glimmer of light was from the full moon over the Atlantic Ocean, which peeked through the tiny crevice between the curtain and the balcony door of the hotel room. Hope calmly arose from the king-size bed and glanced over her shoulder at the unfamiliar face of the unfamiliar man who slept so peacefully after their encounter. Typical. The time was 11:55. It was only 3 hours ago that she sat quietly at a table in the hotel lounge nursing her new baby, rum and Diet Coke. She knew he had been watching her from across the room, but she didn't care. Before long, she knew he'd serve his only purpose in her life, to try to help heal the wound made by Jason's sudden rejection of her, of their 5-year marriage and their relationship, which dated back to freshman year of high school. I spent my life with Jason, for Jason, and this is all the thanks I get, Hope thought as she slipped on her red dress. Night after night, she didn't work the dress. The dress worked her. But like the man she picked up in the hotel lounge this evening, the dress had served its purpose tonight as it had so many other nights. Only neither tonight nor the countless nights in previous weeks had served their purpose, to heal her pain. She quietly picked up her small clutch from the floor where she haphazardly dropped it when she entered the room. In like a raging lion and out like a meek lamb, she thought, while gentle and careful steps carried her out of the room and into the hallway of the upscale oceanfront hotel. It never entered my mind that I would be calling Patrick 6 years after our breakup, Rachel thought as she tried to muster up the courage once again to pick up the phone and face the truth. Just days earlier, after she finally located the right Patrick Long and had gotten up the nerve to call him, their conversation was deferred by distressing news about two of the most meaningful men in her life, her estranged father and her estranged husband. The appearance of her living room reflected the anxiety that consumed her. A backlog of mail and unfolded laundry covered her sofa and coffee table. Silently, Rachel sat in the corner swirling vodka and orange juice in her glass. "This will take the edge off," she said as if someone were in the room with her. With Martin and Malcolm safely tucked into bed, sleeping peacefully, Rachel felt free, if just for a few hours. Her summer respite had been quite eventful. High school reunion, the discovery of her father, and her husband's tragedy. But her biggest shock came when she and Sina spent a week at the beach. It was then that Rachel shared her memorable breakup with Patrick with her friend. Well, it wasn't exactly the breakup itself that was memorable. It was that one last kiss which led to one last, which may have led to Martin. And while Rachel spent the last 5 years as if Martin were her estranged husband's son, that curl of his upper lip and left-hand catch put too much of a question in her mind. Rachel careened to the sofa in search of the phone. Amid a stack of bills hid the patriotic airmail envelope postmarked Sydney, Australia. Rachel stared at the postmark, took a swig of her cocktail, and decided to let her anxiety grow yet another day. It never entered my mind the man of my dreams sitting across the aisle from me. Sina smiled, stretched her arm across the aisle, and touched Rodney, who slept like a baby. Surely I must be dreaming. Sina gently tapped his shoulder. "I hope you were dreaming about me, Sugar Cane." Rodney's smile was so bright it would chase the darkest of storm clouds and the accompanying rain away. "Excuse me, sir," Rodney said to the gentleman in the seat next to him. "Would you mind switching seats with this beautiful woman across the aisle for me? I can arrange a pair of courtside seats for you the next time the International Basketball League's Windy City Gale Force plays in Sydney." "Why, certainly, mate." The man gathered his belongings from underneath the seat in front of him as Rodney stepped into the aisle to allow the change. Just then, the flight attendant came down the aisle with the arrival cards for each passenger. "Did you plan to surprise me all along?" Sina asked as she and Rodney completed their arrival cards. "We'll just say I was very determined." Emphasis on very. Rodney wrapped his arms around Sina and kissed her intensely. They ate dinner while sipping Hunter Valley wine, then fell asleep in each other's arms for the duration of the flight. Done.
Wow. That was good. Are you still with me?
Yeah, I'm still with you. So the interesting thing is I actually wrote this first chapter in 2002.
Oh, wow. Really?
And I outlined the book, and I had all of this drama, and life sort of happened. I had to care for an elderly parent. My father had Alzheimer's, and he battled that for 8 years. And then I got this tenure track position at the university, so the book kept on, being put on the back burner. And then the semester before I wrote the book, or wrote the rest of the book because I had already written the first chapter, I had 3 Black male students in my Black Press and U.S. History class, and they had a profound impact on me.
Oh,
and
wow.
based on my experiences with them, I decided really to develop the male characters more in an effort to create more balanced and positive images of Black men.
Yes. Yes. That is wonderful that you have done that. And and you know, just how powerful that is to create not only more positive and powerful images of Black men, but of people of color, period, in our society, because we have such a history of negative portrayals of both men and women in the society that have been, and that narrative has been controlled by people who did not have our best interests at heart. You know,
Absolutely.
If you go back and you look at, any of the images of, that came out, post Civil War,
right,
and the narratives about, Black people being hypersexualized or oversexualized or lazy or whatever the narrative that came out was, it was all negative and it was a lie. And sometimes those lies can get into the consciousness of a society and the consciousness of a people, and we begin to believe the lies that were told that were all designed to oppress and keep people down. So the fact that you said, I want to have my Black characters, my Black male characters, be more developed. Now they can be complex. They don't have to be perfect, but do not stereotype. Do not write a stereotype. That's the word I'm looking for. Do not write do not write a stereotype. If a person truly has, if you want your characters to be complex and have depth to them with whatever issue they may be going through, research that issue so that you bring authenticity to that issue or that concern, and you can, bring a sense of healing to somebody for it. And again, I'm really so glad you said that, because that had to be a transformation for you as a writer and a storyteller, to do something that was, at a different level.
Yes, and even my character who had the substance abuse problem, he absolutely hits rock bottom. And I remember discussing with several of my male friends what I was thinking about the path that I was thinking of taking him down, and some of them begged me, no, please don't do that, because he's going to lose all of his credibility if you do.
Mm.
I did, and he overcame.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, with that being said, a lot of times, I have been inspired by other writers, because I like to say that my writing is a byproduct of the stuff that I read. And I love reading. That is just like one of my first loves. And, and I hate to admit this, but I've become sort of, highfalutin with my reading. Well, because I want to make sure that I want to, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I want to make sure that the book or the title has something to offer me. And so, I know for me, there have been books that I've read that I thought were just phenomenal, that inspired me. But the book itself did not necessarily get the praise that it deserved. And so a book like that for me was this one book called The Darkest Child by Dolores Phillips.
Phillips, yes.
It's a work of historical fiction. That was the only book Dolores wrote. That book had me talking to the characters as if they were real. I wanted to jump into the story and just shake a few people. But she wrote them in such an authentic and human way that I understood them, but I was also sad for them and I was happy for them. And when I put that book down, I knew that some brain cells had permanent memories of those characters. Roselle Quinn, I'll never forget Roselle Quinn. When I will never forget that character. And so what I want to ask you, is there a book that you've read that, just had a profound impact on you that, perhaps didn't get the praise, or maybe it did get the praise, that you want to share with the readers that you've read?
Wow, let me think about that a second. In my line of work, I read an awful lot of nonfiction.
Nonfiction
and
is
I
fine.
think most recently that book would have to be Barracoon.
Say that again.
And it's a book that Zora Neale Hurston actually wrote back in the 1930s.
Really?
But the publisher did not publish it. Yeah, so she interviewed a man named Cujo Lewis. He was cargo on the last slave ship, which actually came to the United States illegally around 1859, 1860, because the slave trade had ended. So
Right.
He talks about, and this book just came out May 2018, but he talks about what life was like before he was captured, being captured, coming over on the ship. It was a 70-day journey, and being taken to an area in Alabama, not far from Mobile, Alabama, being enslaved, and it's told in his dialect, and that's why the publisher didn't want to publish it in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
They did not want to publish it in his dialect. He also talks about, we're free. They told us we're free, but we don't have anything. Now what? And he talks about how they worked and how they pulled their resources together and bought land. And they actually created a town called Africatown in Alabama. That's
Really?
I think it's 2 miles from downtown Mobile, Alabama. And then what's really wild, I remember January 2018 reading an article about how during low tide, you could still see the hull of the ship because they took it out and burned it. But the remnants of the ship are still there to this day.
Wow.
So it was a book that I actually had my Black Press and U.S. History class read this past semester. And we discussed his experiences in his life, because this is told in his own, basically firsthand. It's like an oral history. She did an oral history interview with him.
Yeah.
And wrote up about his life.
Yeah, offline, you'll have to send me the title of that book. I mean, I would love to read it. On the same level, a book that I just finished last week, that's a nonfiction book that has had a profound impact on my psyche, is a book called Stamped from the Beginning by Abram X. Kendi. Oh my God.
Okay.
He's an academician as well.
Okay.
And he wrote the definitive history of racism and racist ideas. And prior to the 13 colonies and how it continued to grow and spread all the way. And he writes the book from prior to the founding fathers all the way up to Barack Obama, the election of Barack Obama.
Wow.
It is a fascinating look at the stories that were crafted about Africans and how the Bible was twisted in order to justify slavery, and how people how universities and colleges came up with these quote unquote scientific studies that alleged inferiority. And matter of fact, there was even a popular theory that went around that said that black people were cursed because of Ham. There was a Ham theory.
I've heard that before, yeah.
Right. And they've also said that black people are really white on the inside, and when they die, they'll become white. But then people got afraid that says, well, what if this black slave on earth meets me in heaven and his whiteness, will he want to take revenge? I mean, wow. It is some of the most asinine theories that have come up. But even though they were debunked, I mean, they even had a Darwinism. They had a Darwinism theory, natural selection, when it came to that. But anyway, when you look at that and you understand how story was crafted, fiction and nonfiction, and how that just the people who were in control of the narrative that, made people of European descent and here in the Americas look like gods. That just went through every aspect of American life and culture, all the way down to Tarzan.
Wow.
Although, and I'll say this one last thing. Tarzan came about because of Jack Johnson, the prize fighter. In the early part of the 20th century, there was a prize fighter named Jack Johnson who was a heavyweight champion of the world. And white male men had said that black masculinity was inferior. So they went and found a boxer out of retirement, says, we need you to go in there and beat this black man down to show white supremacy and superiority. And this happened around 1912 or somewhere around there. And Jack Johnson, there's even film of it. Jack Johnson soundly beat this man into the ground. He won. And white media and male says, well, black people, don't get your hopes up too high. You're still second-class citizens. And so apparently white men felt so bad about it that this white male came out with this fictional character called Tarzan. And Tarzan grew up in Africa, and he had to tame the savage African and protect his white woman, Jane. And Tarzan would not die. That it just kept going and going, even all the way up until as recently as I want to say 2000, maybe 14 or 15, another version of Tarzan was still filmed. And I'm like, really?
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it went just that deeply. And so, but anyway, that book, was, stamped from the beginning, really looks at that, and you can, you really begin to understand how why our society is functioning the way it is today in this Donald Trump era. You really get to understand it. And it's like just so fascinating. Your students would probably love it. I mean, Kendi he has done his work. I mean, it is just a fascinating read. So Trevy, with that, let me ask you one more quick question. Now, you say you're a professor, and so I want to talk a little bit about what you do as a professor, and what you teach your students.
Okay, so I am a professor associate professor of broadcast and electronic journalism at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Media and Journalism. I'm actually the first Black woman to receive tenure at the School of Media and Journalism at UNC Chapel Hill.
Oh, wow. Congratulations to you on that.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I teach a course in digital storytelling. I teach students how to use audio and video to I'd say, show stories. So my background as a fiction writer, this really helps me teach them how to learn how to use sound, how to learn how to use what we call B-roll images. When you see an interview on television, you have one portion of the video where you see the person on the interview talking, and then you have the pictures that go along to support what the person is saying. That's called B-roll. The interview is called A-roll. And sound, and how to edit that into like a minute 30 story. I teach a course on diversity and communication, and I'm going to do something really different this semester with the sections. I'm going to have them do a class project where, based on whatever their skill set is for their major, they'll work on different aspects of the project, and one of them is going to be reshaping the narrative of Black youth and young adults in the media. And I also teach a course each spring on the Black press in U.S. history. So we started 1827 when the first Black newspaper, Freedom Journal, was founded, looking both at U.S. history and the role the Black press played in it, because it was really an advocacy press. And as I'm sure you're well aware, Robert Abbott, who started the Chicago Defender in 1905 at his landlady's table, was very instrumental in getting African Americans to leave the South.
Yes, to leave the South, yes.
From about 1915 until about 1970.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me ask you this other question. This is a writer's question. If you could meet any writer, living or dead, who would that writer be and why?
Wow. Let me think about that a second. Who would that writer be? 'Cause I've met Toni Morrison. I've met Maya Angelou. Those are like the big ones I would want to meet. Oh my goodness, this question kind of has me stumped a bit.
They can be fiction or nonfiction.
I would be Zora Neale Hurston.
Mm-hmm.
And I, think about her, career during the Harlem Renaissance and the just being a Black writer at that time.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about how the literary landscape has changed since we both first published in 1999. It had to be extremely hard to get your work in front of
hold on a second. I'm going to have you
publish your computers. We can send stuff off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Hold on a second. I'm going to have you repeat that one more time because you were breaking up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
If I could meet any writer, it would be Zora Neale Hurston. I would love to sit down and have a conversation with her about process, about just how the writing process, when they had different technology at that time, and getting in front of publishers and getting your work out, because everything was different. The literary landscape has changed a great deal in the last 20 years since we first published, but it was much different and much more challenging, I'm sure, back then to get published. But she accomplished it. And she was actually also a professor at North Carolina Central University. So she spent a lot of time in the area where I currently live,
Mm-hmm.
as well as on my campus. It's said that she was one of the first Black students, though I don't think she was officially enrolled. She was really good friends with the theater professor, Paul Green, at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In 1930.
Yeah. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. So for me, there's a couple of people I'd want to meet. I would want to meet Zora Neale. She's one of my ones I would want to meet. I would want to meet Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Okay.
And to pick her
Yes.
Yeah. To pick her brain about, although she called herself an abolitionist, but she painted a very docile human being in her character. I would also want to go back and I would want to meet the founding fathers of this country when they wrote that Declaration of Independence and really look at, why they did not really mean what they said when they said all men are created equal and all men are free, because they weren't talking about people of color, and to understand that. And then the last person I would want to meet, it would be Phyllis Wheatley, because she defied what Europeans thought of Africans. She completely defied it. She got educated and she could write. Yeah. And even George Washington respected her. And I just, it was like, I would, want to know, how did you, how did you survive as a Black woman who was educated, knowing that everyone around you that were your fellow countrymen of color from Africa were not? And what that must have been like and felt like, and the type of fights that, she had to do, the type of battles she had to deal with that, I would be fascinated to have, conversations with her about that. Well, Trevy, we have been close to an hour already. it goes by very quickly. So
Wow.
Yeah, I know. This was a great conversation. I had a really great time talking to you. So Trevy, if people want to get your book, Time Will Tell, or Round Bout Midnight, or email you or get in touch with you, how do they find you on social media?
So I am at Dr. Trevy on Twitter and Facebook, and my website is www.drtrevy.com. And my books are also available at all online retailers.
Yes. Now that's wonderful. Now I'm going to, give you a little push here. You need to get your books in audio. And I know you know how to do that.
I'm working on that. Yeah, I am working on that. I've had several people ask me that recently. So that's something that I am working on, and I hope to have that done. I'm about halfway through recording Time Will Tell. So I'll put that out when it's finished and work on Round Bout Midnight.
That is wonderful. Well, Trevy, again, thank you so much for being here with us on A Reader's Paradise. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, Earl. I really enjoyed our conversation.
All right. And folks, don't forget to hang around and take a listen to Lenny Gray, the audio drama, which will be coming up immediately following this podcast. Hi, this is Earl Sewell, host of the podcast, A Reader's Paradise. I'm here to let you know about a new audio drama that I have created called Lenny Gray. It is a bi-weekly show that you can find out on Apple Podcasts, on Spreaker.com, on Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. So, what I'm doing here right now is giving you a preview of the show. Season 1 is up and running, and I hope that you will go over, check it out, leave a rating, and a review. Until then, I hope you enjoy this preview of the audio drama, Lenny Gray. Katie Books Productions presents Lenny Gray, an audio drama, written, produced, and narrated by Earl Sewell. Previously on Lenny Gray.
I got to have you, Lenny. I ain't gonna let no other man get a hold of you. I aim to be the only man in your life for the rest of your days. I mean that. So either you marry me tonight or you don't marry in your lifetime. I'll make sure of it.
There was an ultimatum in Curly's voice and an uncompromising fire in his eyes. He would beat her into her grave if she didn't do what he wanted. And Ida, his mean-spirited mother, would stand by and allow him to do it. Both of them had caverns of blackness so deep in their souls that even the light of God couldn't reach the bottom of them. He'd hit her before for trying to break up with her. He punched her so hard that she had a headache for 2 days. She couldn't go to the sheriff. He was another member of the white side of Curly's family. Besides, Sheriff Quinney cared as much about a colored man beating his woman as he did about shooting, hanging, or placing a colored person in jail. It just didn't matter to him, one way or the other. Lenny Gray wanted to move, but felt as if something had forced her body to become paralyzed. Curly took a slightly gentler approach. He pulled her close to him, attempting to ease her fear. He pressed her cheek against his chest and combed his fingers through her hair. Lenny Gray felt tears stinging the back of her eyes when she inhaled the strong scent of moonshine that was seeping through his skin.
You belong to me. I wanted you the moment you started to blossom. I said to myself, Curly, that Lenny Gray is going to be your wife. You got them pretty gray eyes, long black hair. You the prize of Sweetwater. Well, my prize anyway. That's why I kept coming around your daddy. I wasn't coming around so much for him as I was doing it to try to get close to you. I wanted you to like me. Don't you remember how I was always bringing you stuff you needed? If you needed new shoes that your daddy couldn't afford to get right away, I helped him out. In fact, I'm the one who got you them shoes you got on your goddamn feet now. Most folks around this town ain't never gonna know what it feel like to have shoes on their feet. Is the preacher still in the wagon, boy?
Lenny Gray looked into Ida's face, which had an impatient expression.
Yeah, he's still there,
Curly answered.
I'm gonna go get him so y'all can be married and we can get back before the rain starts,
said Ida as she stepped off the train tracks and walked towards the road. Curly stepped back and placed Lenny Gray's face between the palms of his calloused hands. He looked so deeply into her eyes that she felt her soul wince.
I know you love me. You may not say it or know how to show your feelings for me, but I know and understand that you do. I'm the best man you could ever hope for, and the sooner you let that settle into your head, the better. Don't make no sense for you try to run away from a good man like me. Shh. Don't talk. Just let me hold your shivering body close. You carry my family inside of you. There ain't no way in the world I'm gonna allow a pretty girl like you to run away from me to be mistreated by some fool. I'm gonna take care of you. You won't have to worry about nothing except taking care of the shanty I'm gonna build and the babies we gonna put on this earth. Lenny, we gonna make a lot of pretty babies together.
Lenny Gray felt as if she had just fallen out of the trouble tree and hit every branch on the way down. She was standing on unsteady legs. She didn't want to be married, and she didn't want a life in a leaky shanty filled with babies. That much she knew. That way of life was all too common in this town. In an act of desperation, she pushed Curly away from her and began running again.
Lenny, come back here!